Bernard is remote, I guarantee.
No, we'll do it. Definitely. We've got 3 chairs. We've got so much in the way of chair.
We got 3 chairs for the chairs. I mean, I'm gonna say Colin's gonna fall off.
For these blue
I'm gonna say Colin's gonna fall off because he's gonna get up and run for the microphone once for you. That's gonna result in yeah, but you also. Oh, you were over.
Sweet, sweet disability pay.
So these are my TLS slides. It's so slow. Come on. Set it to a little bit. I always like steal some picture from like Wikipedia for the
It's time.
So this, and then I have the note well.
People like it.
That's right, and then this one is like, yeah, I started to add this because there's like at least one topic that's pretty contentious and all the people Just remember, red button. Remember, we have the red button.
We're willing to cross it out and write in anything you like. I guess. We're still looking for a Jabber relay. So if you have a Jabber client and a willingness to relay, please let us know. I remind you, because we have Meet Echo, it's probably going to be a pretty light duty. Russ, welcome. Would you be willing to be Jabber relay, Russ? Be glad, Scribe's next. So
Volunteer early.
you don't need a Jabber client to scribe. Access to Etherpad is handy.
Two chairs. Press the red.
Not Jabber Scribe, just regular Scribe. We're looking for a note taker. For those of you who haven't done notes for us in the past, what we're really looking for is somebody to write down action items that are not captured in the GitHub. Oh, Mr. Thatcher, thank you very much. So because we're going to be driving a lot of this off of the GitHub issues list, anything that's captured there is not required to be in the notes, but the action item style notes is what we're looking for. Okay, we now have our Jabber Scribe and our Jabber Relay and our Scribe. Cullen, would you care to join us at the front of the room, or are you going to stay back there for a while?
I think as long as we're doing the JSON stuff, I'm going to stay at the back here.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Okay, welcome to Seoul. This is IETF 97. For those of you who've been counting, we've been at Rtcweb now for 19 years. Many of us have children now that did not exist at the time Rtcweb began, some of them currently in college. Actually, not in college, but definitely elementary school. This is the Note Well. If you have not seen it yet during the week, please take a moment to review it. It references the rules for IETF contributions. If you're not familiar with them, take a moment to familiarize yourself with them before you make a contribution. I note that it's not really possible to say Note Well in Korean, so when I did the translation, I had to change it to attention please. But here is the same information, courtesy of Google Translate, in at least a theoretically equivalent form. If any of you speak Korean and would like to provide a better form, please let me know and I'll be happy to adjust the slides. So here is the agenda as it was when it was published. there is a major agenda bash from your chairs. Also, Cullen, I need a hum from you, Cullen. And thank you very much. So the Rtcweb agenda, as we have it for today, is working group status update for 5 minutes, JSEP for 90 minutes, IP handling for 15 minutes, FEC for 15 minutes, followed by Wednesday, which, as you know, does not have any numbers of minutes because JSEP revisit if needed. Because this is our major piece of work at the moment, we were willing to push things into very tiny slots in order to get as much of JSEP done as we could. As it happens, we got 2 reviews just before the working group meeting. Thank you to Magnus and Harold. One of them has actually been entered into the GitHub. I have not yet entered Harold's, but it's on the mailing list for you to review if you'd like to take a quick look at it. So we have tentatively added a 3rd session on Friday. Now I say tentatively, the Secretariat has actually already listed it. Our AD has approved it. It is available for us if we need it, but we may have to move some things from Wednesday to Friday if we don't get through the issues for JSEP in the first 2 days. We did get one piece of information that draft Copeland Rtcweb P2P IDP cannot be presented in Friday because the author or the presenter, excuse me, will actually be traveling by the time that new session is there. So with this new information, are there any further agenda bashes? No, okay. Working group status update. Happy Minions, yay! Rtcweb Transports is now in the RFC editor's queue. Congratulations to everyone. We have new versions for draft IETF, Rtcweb FEC, and IP handling, and we have had 2 cycles, thank you, of Rtcweb JSEP. So we are very happy Minions about that. Any other working group status updates people would like to share? Anybody get married, have new babies, send their children to college, as earlier noted? No? Okay. Then I think the next piece is to remind you of what our dependencies, which are still in various working groups. Okay, so we still have some stuff to do, but obviously the great hairy ball that is JSEP is the biggest thing on our plate right now. And so if you need more information, you're welcome to go to Cullen's draft for the dependencies currently in Rev 14 for more information. Here we are mostly done. If you have any questions on this, feel free to get to the microphone, but we probably don't want to be very prolix about the questions on this topic. Okay, on to JSEP. I believe, Ecker, you are going to be presenting?
No.
Okay.
So these slides were actually made 10 minutes from now. So I am not entirely, I think, is this live?
This is live.
So I don't know what they say, quite seriously.
Wait, so at the moment when I pressed present, it took a snapshot.
Oh, okay.
So if you find something, for example, if our Jabber relay hears something that says, hey, you should refresh them, let me know, we'll refresh them, and then we'll pick up.
Is Justin on the thing?
I do not see him.
He's not in the.
Okay, perhaps you could ping him on Hangouts, that's or Allo or something. Duo, I don't know, whatever it is. Okay. So next slide. Yeah, so we spun 2 new drafts in the time since the last IETF, which is 2 more than the last time. We made quite a few changes. They're all reported in GitHub and changed logs and whatever. And as is now traditional, since they're working for last call, I am too lazy to summarize them. We actually did a fair amount of restructuring, so it's really a little hard to do that. We have a number of issues that we didn't get around to fixing before last call or that were raised post last call. Actually, we have a number of issues that were raised like this afternoon, which we haven't really. So what I'm going to do is I've got some slides that cover the issues that we had chances to produce slides for, and then we can go through the issues list if we get through those. Is it Boba here, by the way, somewhere?
No, but I think he'll be in Mitch.
Oh.
He's living on that screen.
Oh, okay. He lives on the screen. Oh, good. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Right. Fantastic. So, as you can see, we have these transceiver concepts, and we now have like a number of different fobs which you can do to control the things happening. And there's the transceiver, which says what you'd like to have happen, and there's like the negotiation, and as you can see, they don't necessarily match. And people were quite confused about what means what. So on the screen, we have this proposal for what we ought to think happen, which is this current direction thing, which tells you what the transceiver is, and then the direction, which tells you what we expect to happen if you were to do an offer answer. Yeah. I guess I can only tell you what's on the screen, and people should read this and see if they think this is a satisfactory resolution to this issue, which, as I say, was that people were confused about what set direction actually meant. Who actually raised this issue, by the way? Can you tell us?
Taylor.
Oh, it's Taylor. So I'm going to presume, for the sake of this discussion, this is Taylor and Justin are adjacent, that Justin negotiated with Taylor on what this text says, and therefore Taylor is satisfied by this text. So is anybody else dissatisfied by this text?
No, hold on. It came from Bernard.
Oh, okay.
I think this matches what we decided in the W3C interim last week. So
Okay.
there's just some, you can bike shit over naming, but.
So that's an excellent moment to raise a point from the chairs. We are in working group last call. If you come up and have a suggestion that's truly a bike shed paint suggestion, we're going to shout you down. We are now looking for issues which would harm interoperability if somebody had a problem with the way the spec was done. So we're really, really past the point of having comments that are like, this really would be cleaner if it said RTP transceiver frats instead of RTT transceiver foo. Really focus your comments on what's going to make this spec clean enough for somebody to implement from it. And please try and leave your bike shed paint for other things. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody object to this text? Or what this text says we're going to do, which we will do. Okay. Right. Okay. So we have this pooling this one I actually understand. We have this pooling concept where you're able to say, I would like you to gather to gather X candidates before we do anything in particular. And the idea here was that, say I know I'm going to make a call, I'm trying to reduce delay. So I know I'm going to make a call, but I haven't actually done set local. And in particular with the client, it's pretty common that you know you're going to be doing audio and video, but you're like waiting for the user to approve camera microphone access. So you could say, start gathering ICE candidates before I've done anything. And so we had this way, so that we've had this for a long time. You can say get set pool, and then someone noticed that what happened, that you don't actually start gathering until you called set local, at which point you started to deplete the pool. And what happens if you say set pool again with the same number or different number or smaller number or something, right? And the semantics seemed extremely unclear. And we sort of thought about this for a while and came to the conclusion there was actually no legitimate purpose whatsoever for doing this. And so the easiest way to deal with it was just to say that if you do this, it's a no-op, and the implementation will ignore it. And we discussed saying it would cause a failure, but maybe in some future world we'll invent some reason why you'd want this. And if you make it cause a failure, you're never able to do it again. So we might as well call it a no-op.
Magnus Westerlund. But so after the set local, you run the gathering and you created the pool. And
no, you just deplete the pool. You start when you call set.
Yeah, okay. You consume the pool.
Yes.
But if you know application now that's want to either shut down the pool or change the pool so it can actually do an offer with more lines later.
So so shut down the pool, I think, so bear in mind, this whole pool thing is essentially advisory in the sense that the the browser's not required to do anything.
Yeah.
But So I think shut down the pool. I would expect the browser would shut down the pool once it had finished gathering. As far once that local was completed. As far as increase the size of the pool, yeah, I mean, I suppose you might want that, but we just couldn't come up with a use case where it actually was important, and it made the browser's life. It's much harder to specify how you should behave in this circumstance. So.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about that case about if you actually would like to change for some reason, but I don't have a specific use case, so I'm not strong.
That's kind of where we ended up.
Yeah.
Okay. As I say, so I propose option A, which is we'll just say it's a no op, and then if for some reason we decide that we should have a specified behavior because the whole thing's advisory anyway, we'll just give it semantics, and then browsers can ignore it or not as they please.
Is there anybody who is deeply unhappy with option A at this point? Okay.
Good. Next slide. Right. We have these mids and rids, and Magnus pointed out in comments that that they potentially represent a privacy threat because they might contain various kinds of sensitive information. Now they're actually pretty short, but you can still leak some information. And so the proposal here, based on I think Magnus' suggestion, is just basically contain text saying generate them in some non-leaking way, like a counter or random value, and then we'll crib liberally from Magnus's proposed text to generate the resolution to this. Now I think the RID actually may not belong in JSEP, but I looked to see if we had any recommendations. I didn't see any, but
So I think actually the actual generation text or recommendation about generation is actually an MUsic issue in the bottom, but what's acceptable here, etc. In this group is important for decision in MUsic, so to say.
So I guess my understanding is the mid documents already exist, so we're effectively retroactively recommending shit for them. But the RID document we could just fix now, right?
So the RID document has some very basic text, not actually generation algorithm, but says basically recommendation is no more than 3. I think but it's the chance is still there to actually change it to generating a specific generation algorithm if you actually want to tie this down even further. So
okay, I have a RID author there.
So just real quick on RID. RID is in the ROC editor queue. And it does say basically start with 1 and go up. Now, it's been pointed out to me that the text is somewhat ambiguous in as much as it's not clear after you get to 9 whether you go 0 and then colon and then semicolon, or if you go 9 and then 10 and then 11. And so we probably need to put some additional text in there. But I don't think that's going to be controversial. I think we can do that in Auth 48. But I don't think we can do anything far more advanced than that. I think RID has pretty much set its course.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to have that algorithm be the one we specify.
Jonathan Maddox, I mean, I think the other thing that maybe this is a separate issue here is that, do you have a separate slide for whether we're doing header extension encryption on these?
No.
Because I thought there was a separate question of whether, I think a strict reading of the SDS header extension draft implies that, assuming you're encrypting RTCP, which I think we decided is I think might be a separate issue, then these, I forget the exact wording, but basically if you're encrypting RTCP, then you should also encrypt RTCP header, SDS header extensions.
So we actually covered this a good bit on the list, and I'd like you to go back and read that thread because
I didn't. I read the thread. I wasn't sure it actually converged.
Okay, so the last thing that we put out on the thread was that the document actually gives you 2 options. One is that if you're encrypting RTCP, you must also encrypt the SDS headers, or you must explain why you are not. And so we said we would explain why we are not rather than encrypting them.
Okay.
And the reason we are not is basically this, that these are either monotonically increasing or randomly generated, but that they contain no privacy sensitive information because of the way the generation mechanism works. And as a result, they do not require this confidentiality.
Okay. And that would be in JSEP, or that would be in the mid and RID documents?
So my understanding here is that because RID is done, we're not doing anything to it that's not possible in Auth 48. The actual text has to go into the bundle document in MMusic, and that what we're checking here is to make sure that using one of these safety algorithms isn't going to mess with anybody's implementation and cause a problem.
Okay.
I'd like to propose any further discussion of where this text goes be dealt with by Ted.
So Magnus?
Magnus, I think it actually needs to go into the security architecture document to frame that because of the RID.
That would be fine too, but I think that the point that we're trying to make here is the actual algorithm has to be in the document which specifies how mids work.
Yes, the
And
algorithm,
then in
yes.
our security document, we can help explain why that's the case. I believe the security considerations of that document could also be updated. But what we're really checking on here is to make sure that nobody had the impression that they were going to be able to put in 48 bits of this, and this change is going to be, you know, a huge deal for them, so that they have a moment to get up and say why. Does that make sense? You don't look terribly happy. Are you okay?
I'm okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else who has a concern about kind of the mechanics of it before we go back to the proposal? Okay, so I don't think so.
This is what we're supposed to do, and we will negotiate with you and other people to
Okay, so
make it happen.
there are two questions I think left here. And one is, because there's sort of a limitation on what we can do to update the document for RID, are we making the algorithm for RID and MID completely parallel? Will it be our advice as Rtcweb to the MMusic group that they should be in fact parallel, or is it okay if they're two different things provided both are safe?
I'd be fine if they're two different things as long as they're both safe.
That's great, because if they can be two different things, if they happen to be the same one, it collapses the waveform just as well. Okay, nobody has a problem if there are two different ones? Perfect, great, thanks.
Next. Okay. So when we, like, you know, in the accords that ended the great multi-year multicast simulcast debate, we decided that the resolution would be that browsers would be able to send simulcast, but would not be set up to receive simulcast, on the premise that the primary reason why you wanted simulcast was so you could service like MCUs and send multiple streams to those MCUs. We now are faced with a border incursion from Bernard Aboba, who suggests that perhaps browsers in fact should receive simulcast. Let's take the here comes Bernard. Let me take the points that are not about browsers receiving simulcast first, which is, there's this text that like says that like there's no way to examine the simulcast state from the API, but then we like added transceivers and get parameters, so now there's some way to like actually examine that, and so we're just going to remove that text that says you can't do it. I don't think anybody objects to that. Like, well, you know, whatever. There's a second point, which is that in our the text currently suggests that if you are the only way that if you are the answerer, and there's no real way if you're the browser and you're the answer, there's no real way for the MCU to send you an offer that you can then respond to a simulcast. And the reason is because the way you sort of talk about add simulcast is by doing add transceiver with a bunch of different parameters for I guess is it one transceiver or multiple transceivers? Do you remember? One transceiver with a bunch of different parameters, and you have no same way of saying those values based on this, based on this unavailable offer to you. So perhaps that is resolvable. Bernard is kind of suggesting it is. So I suggest we deal first with this point A, which is, does anybody object to us cleaning up the draft so it makes clear that, like, in fact, you can examine simulcast state? Then second, deal with point B, which is, should we find some way? Is it now possible? I guess they're both called A now. So 1A and 2A. In 2A, the question of whether you should be able to give simulcast in an answer as opposed to just an offer. And then finally, we can deal with the question of whether or not browsers should be able to receive simulcast. That is my proposed ordering of these questions.
Okay, so if anybody has comments on the first A, we'll clean up text in draft. Please come to the microphone now.
We also have to get Bernard.
Please do it.
Okay, Bernard, we're going to bring you into the queue now.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any major comments on what Eric said, other than just the question came up as to whether you could a browser could answer and accept a simulcast offer, and I think the answer, at least what we have right now, is that it doesn't have to accept that offer. But then the question came up as, what if it did? What would it look like? And I think the answer is that receiver.getParameters would tell you what it accepted. But as Eric said, there is no way to influence, to either figure out what the browser could actually do. So you wouldn't know that your browser could receive simulcast. There's no capabilities that tell you that. And also there's no way to influence it. So you can't set like the number of streams that it could possibly receive. It just would have to have some intrinsic set of stuff it can do and then answer based on that.
So Adam Roach, this feels an awful lot like the just because you can doesn't mean you should kind of thing. I think we largely came to the conclusion that receiving simulcast at a browser is not an interesting use case for the types of things we have in mind right now. And as long as we leave the possibility of it happening open in the future, we're fine. So I really would, it's the top level thing of receiving simulcast, I would love to see that off the table. The second order issue of if we receive an offer and we'll be answering and want to be able to be, say in our answer we want simulcast, I think for those use cases, we are probably better off just because we want to get this done, saying there's a workaround of you create an offer, basically do a reoffer on the session to get into a simulcast session instead, and everything's fine. And that's what I would propose we do.
That is basically what the text says now.
So yeah, Killinger, like +1 on what Adam's saying. That's what it says now. And remember that part of the way it's written a little bit vague like this right now is we're leaving open the door to add full simulcast support, whatever that means later. It's just not required there. So there isn't text that says you can't possibly do this. That's why it's a little bit weird when you read it. So, but I think we're all coming around to, other than the mistake we have on a little bit of text being wrong, that like I'm largely arguing for leave it like it is right now.
So is there anybody in the room or in MeetEcho or Jabber who wants to add their support for what Bernard is arguing for? Okay, so I don't see anybody. We will of course confirm all of this on the list, but at the moment, I think the rough consensus is that we will not accept this change at this time.
Yes, the next slide. I'm gonna need to phone a friend. I see Justin. Justin has already knew that I would be too incompetent to handle this, and is approaching the microphone.
Here we go, Justin.
We think you're muted.
Try again. So
Should I kick him out? Start again?
You have to wait till it gets up to the point.
All right, 2 and 4 instead.
Okay, so let me try and find you a reduced, lesser version adjusted here. So on the first, there's a bunch of different issues that are related here. Okay, first one was right now we have this stuff that if you have PTs that match multiple inlines and you have no other information to route them on, we say go to the first inline section. And I think Magnus rightly points out that it actually that's an insane situation to be in. You shouldn't be doing PT based approach if you have multiple PTs on this, if they're not unique. And so it would be better to have an error than to have duplicates. So I think on the first one, what we're proposing here is we will remove that so that if you have multiple PTs that are identical and you can't tell which M line to go to, instead of going to the first M line, we'll drop the RTP packet. So that's the real first issue. Anybody want to speak to objecting to that sort of change? Okay, we'll take that as great. Justin, take 2. Perfect.
Let's try one more time.
Feel like a hobbit.
The blue screen adjusted.
You sound like a hobbit talking through a goldfish microphone. Could you maybe we could cell phone him in or something like PSTN? Okay, so let me try this next one. So in all of these things where we get, I mean, unfortunately, the more you dig into RTCP messages, the more you find like data destined for various people inside of there. In fact, Magnus, this is yours. You want to say it?
I can try. Magnus Westlund. So from my perspective, the thing with around RTCP processing is that when you receive RTCP packets, you decapsulate them, look at who's the intended receiver of that information, and you forward to according to the SSRC to that particular transceiver that owns the SSRC. And they can deal with the information. I'm talking about the information of packet level, really. You're saying, okay, you forward whatever information is relevant of that packet type, if it's a feedback message in the FCI, or if it's a report block, or whatever would care about that information gets it related to the SSRC, and they need to then to be associated with the receiver. Otherwise, you just kind of ignore the information or store it local in this RTP stack. That's would be my suggestion for this.
Okay, so that's one thing about what part of the packet. Right now, there's a description we describe as routing the whole packet to whoever needs it versus the part of the packet that they need to do it. You know, the whole packet does include the information. We couldn't figure out how to write this stuff. Like, I'm not sure this really matters as a change to the spec. But it wasn't quite the issue Bernard raised. Bernard raised, look, there's this one message you guys forgot to talk about looking inside of, and you need to look inside of it. He's totally right. We'll try and add text to look inside that. But then the next question of your issue of how do we forward, I mean, it seems sort of semantic, like what, I'm not, like, if you have text that's clean and easy for us to integrate in, like, I got no problem with this. I think we'd all agree it'd be fine. We just don't quite know what to do.
Hi, apologies, I missed the very beginning of this discussion, so hopefully I'm not repeating stuff that's already been said. I mean, I tend to think the issue with this text is that it's trying to talk about how to route RTP and RTCP packets. And I think, I mean, I had a similar comment on the bundle draft. I think the issue is that it should be talking about how to associate RTP sources with JSEP level things. And all these things about which packets get associated with what should be handled by the RTP layer anyway. And it's a case of, well, this RTP level thing gets mapped up to this JSEP level thing. And then, you know, all the which bits of RTCP packets go to which SSRC and which bit of RTP should all be handled by the RTP layer anyway. And it's just associating that with the higher level stuff.
All right, let me
So,
a couple slides. 364 is the one that call it's speaking to.
So,
well, I mean, I think it relates to this as well. I mean, it talks about handling SSRCs and so on.
So just a point of order. I think, I mean, we talked about, the author team talked about this privately and came to the conclusion that really probably all this crap should be in bundle, not here. I mean, JSEP tries to write descriptions of how things work, but really this make more sense in bundle.
Well,
Which doesn't mean it's solve the problem, obviously. But
well, I think that may make it simple, and that's what I was hoping the solution would be. In that you know, the bundle draft already describes in the most recent version how to associate an RTP source with, you know, the bundle IDs, and so that lets you map it to an M-line. And I'm hoping that all this thing has to do is say, well, you know, once you've got the bundle stuff, that just maps it onto a JSEP level thing, and we're done.
Well, I think there's I think there's a feeling on the author team that the bundle spec might not be sufficiently sort of straightforward to follow. That's what the purpose of writing this algorithm. But maybe we can figure out some way to take the algorithm we have here and simplify it or map it correctly into bundle and then take it out of JSEP. I'm going to step out and let these guys talk.
Let me get Bernard in the queue here.
Yeah, as was mentioned, the RTCP question is a lot more complicated because it relates to senders as well as receivers, and also the packets go to multiple parties. In ORTC, it got so complicated. We actually went over all of these questions, and when we try to look at every RTCP packet, it got so complicated. We just said, look, send this to everybody, all the senders and receivers, and let them pick through the pieces that are relevant to them and leave it at that. because
I mean,
it really gets very, very complicated if you want to cover every message that's in RTP usage and how it should, what pieces get routed where.
I think my point is that you don't need to specify it because the RTP stack already handles this. So you need to associate the RTP source, which will get all of this information with the JSEP level thing, rather than trying to repeat all the stuff which should be part of your RTP stack anyway in this spec.
Could we ask the MediaGo folks to come and help us get Justin up?
So, Magnus Westlund, I really agree with Colin here, but to be clear about RTCP stack, my view or RTCP handling, and towards Bernard, it really is that the question here, if you have a stack that do this and has its API and it provides the information in relation to sources, if you bound the sources to the correct transceiver or receiver or sender, you would get the information which is relevant around those requests. And you would have that clean separation. You didn't need to describe it in that way. You're saying basically, you can say, okay, after you bound the SSRCs, you're going to get the RTCP information, or you should forward the relevant RTCP information for that SSRC to the particular sender or receiver. So
Justin, can you try speaking again?
Test 1 2 test 1 2.
Hey.
I gave up all on Bluetooth. Switch to a wire. So this may have been covered while I was trying to get my AV setup figured out, but I'll come back to the point about Bernard is making about everything being very complicated to get all these SSRCs pulled out, and it might just need to be dumped into the session. But can someone explain to me why the FCI stuff has its own SSRC that's distinct from RTP-FB, and is just checking the RTP-FB thing, wouldn't that be sufficient?
Jonathan Lennox, because it actually says that the RTP-FB, I mean, I'm not justifying its design, but I'm pretty sure that in fact must be 0. That field in the FIR. The goal here, I don't know why they decided to add yet another level of aggregation, but you can send FIR through multiple sources simultaneously in a single FIR, and so there's multiple targets rather than just a single target, and so the single target field must be 0, and I don't know why they designed it this way, but that's the way it's designed.
Okay. So it is.
Yeah, it is like that, and it's because of overhead, basically. Because you would eat a whole RTCP packet header for each source you want to report on. So that's just Magnus. I had one other issue, or I say one other aspect of this, which see if I can remember correctly. And it dropped away again. Damn it. No, blank. I got blanked.
But I mean, the overall point that was made before, though, I think is an important point of we need to go dig into these packets pretty substantially to figure out like which particular SSRC or which particular sender this feedback is for. And since the goal of this stuff is basically figure out which RTP sender, is the thing that should receive these packets, there seems to be no other way. There seems to be 2 ways we do it. We either have this table that's here and we say, use this to create a map and route it just to the correct RTP sender, or we just say, forget it. We're gonna fan this out to everything. And if you get something you don't know about, then just ignore it. So it sounded like Bernard was arguing for the latter.
Yeah. Jonathan Lennox, I mean, I think just to sort of +1 Magnus and Colin, there is a lot of complexity here, but this is all below effectively the API surface of your RTP stack. I mean, the RTP stack has to do all this digging. There's a lot of complexity in an RTP stack, but the API surface is essentially just, hey, you got an FIR, or hey, you got a timber. And how that worked underneath is not your problem and not your business. And I think if you model this as, yeah, there's a lot going on the surface on your RTP stack, but what you actually get, what the mapping that happens here is actually sort of the output of that API surface effectively. I mean, this is an internal thing, but that gives you, here's a yeah, for RTP, yes, this maps the thing that you get maps more or less one-to-one with a packet. But for RTCP, it doesn't. RTCP, it's much more. Here's updated information. Here's an event that came in. That I think will make your life a lot happier, and that's what you get from saying what we're actually doing the mapping here is with sources, not with packets.
So from the chair's perspective, there are two questions on this slide. The first question, I just want to confirm that we are all okay with revising this text with the PT-based S-source latching. Nobody has any concerns about that?
I have.
Oh, okay.
No, so it's not a concern. It's actually an addition to this, because this relates to the bundling question and what text goes into bundle and what might be unique for the ACES document. Okay.
Okay, so there's a different slide for that. Okay. But for this side, we're all agreeing that revising this text is necessary, and we're okay with seeing a PR for that, right?
Well, I
okay.
did have one comment on that first bullet point.
Okay.
Okay, so my question was, do we even get in that situation? So when we were writing the routing rules as they are right now, in the interest of simplifying, we wrote it the way it is. And this idea that you could have multiple inlines with, or not with, let's see, overlapping payload types, but no other way to disambiguate, like.
It's an error condition.
Yeah, so if set local and set remote description just don't let you get in that state, then.
Your peer is, Jonathan, I mean, your peer is not necessarily running JSON. Your peer is just giving you an SDP blob. So it's possible your peer is giving you something, actively hostile, which is screwing with you. But I think if you end up in this situation, it's an error condition. So yeah, I think that's why I'm saying drop it. I mean, yes, a compliant browser will never do this.
Right. Okay. So the routing rules right now say if this information is in this transceiver state, then route it so. But I'm saying you shouldn't be able to get your transceiver in that state in the first place.
Yes. So it's.
Hi, Alice Chan. On the bullet of PT-based SSIC latching, I'm completely okay with revising this text. That is not the same as saying that I will be okay with the text after it is revised. That is just formality.
So what we would do then is ask them to present a PR before the Wednesday meeting. That would be cool. State.
And on the routing of stuff thing, I got the feeling that yes, we're violating levels of concern here, because the RTP specs say which RTCP messages belong to which sources or destinations. So digging into FIR, timber, and so on is architecturally wrong. We should be saying that that stuff that comes in that belongs to this SSRC, however that is determined by the RTP stack, goes to this source. End of story.
So I'll point out that if I understood what Bernard said about his implementation correctly, what would actually happen is you would get these at places where they are not expected because they're spraying them. And so if that's going to happen, we need to figure out whether that's an error condition and they should stop, or whether it's something that can be safely ignored if it comes into an SSRC for which it is not salient. And I think
I would maintain that is a property of an internal implementation detail and is not observable on either the protocol interface or the API interface. So the spec should just say, do it right.
So I guess I'm taking a position on where things should appear and where the API boundaries are. I think the opinion of the people who've had to implement this is that the collection of documents we have does not do a very good job of explaining what you want to do, and that we need somewhere to have it written down in a clear way that implementers can understand what it is they ought to do. And the purpose of this text was to do that. And so it doesn't, like, it may be the opinion of RTP people that it's clear, but we don't think it's clear, and we'll be able to do it. So like, so like the bottom line has got to go somewhere. I don't care where it goes, but like, like we do need to answer this question that is not specified by RTP already. Even if it is, it needs hermeneutics or something to explain that.
Okay, Colin Perkins. So the issue of which bits of RTCP packets get associated with what is an RTP level thing. If it's not clear that you should route things to the SSRC, to the RTP source identified by the SSRC, which they have in the packet, then we can write a document that says, look at the SSRC and map it to the RTP source identified by that SSRC. But that's an RTP thing, and it's something that is general to all implementations of RTP, and therefore it shouldn't be in this document.
And as I say, I have taken no position on which document or this auto
And
period.
if we need to write a document that says that, then we can happily do that.
Okay, so I'm going to cut the line at the current set of speakers.
Did you want to follow up on this? Because I have a...
Oh, just saying that I'm perfectly fine with the text saying your route to destination based on SSRC. Here are a few examples of where you find the SSRC to route on. And for the rest, you, go dig into your RTP documentation. I'm not fine with having something that looks like it's normative and might be taken as overriding RTP specifications.
I didn't think I endorsed that.
Colin, Magnus?
Colin Perkins. On the first bullet point on the slide, I agree that there are problems with payload type-based SSRC latching. In particular, I think it should go away entirely. So yes, I agree that it needs revising. And I think when we get to the discussion of how the routing happens with RTP sources, I think that it should fall out of that discussion. Yeah, the rest, as I've said before, I think that one of the later slides covers this. I think we should probably move on to that.
Magnus, you have the last word before the chairs.
Yeah, I also want to comment on like setting that's not been clear. I mean, the problem there is we don't have an API, RTP API spec, because there's so many different ways of implementing RTP and they have been different. And I think that's part of the confusion here, is that you can't write it to get specified API towards an RTP stack to get the information. So
Okay, so oh, sorry.
I just left him in there.
Oh, okay.
He's just live.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I think we have two possibilities here, and I'm going to suggest that since we have the advantage of being at an IETF plenary meeting where there are a lot of people who understand RTP very well, I'd like to look to folks in the room who understand this problem, and I'm thinking perhaps Jonathan and Colin, to get together and come up with a proposed set of text edits that we can then review on Wednesday. Do you have time to do that, Jonathan? Colin, can you work with Jonathan to come up with text edits for this that we can then review on Wednesday?
Yes, although I would prefer to, that I think we also need to work with some of the authors of this document.
Absolutely, but
yeah, I'm happy to sit down with Colin or
yeah. So Colin,
whoever it is. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take advantage of the fact that people are around, and Colin, and Jonathan are going to come up with a PR for this. And we now have Russ as Jabber Relay, I believe.
Right. From Bernard, he says he agrees with Colin. The PT-based SSRC latching should go away.
Well, if the PR removes text, all the better. Yes. Okay, so
So also on the second point here, I think we're going to revisit this point in about 2 slides when we talk about the bundle and the layering. So perhaps we should move right to that.
Okay, so we'll reorder. The next one will be skipped, and we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
You should just do this, Justin.
Okay. Oh, I'm talking about 364 though. Do you want to take that one, Eric?
This is 364.
Okay. So, all right. So we just talked about how RTCP should, like, you know, how this package should be filtered to the right RTP senders and receivers. And the comment that came in, I think this was from Colin, was basically, should this text even be here at all? And, you know, does that mean moving all the text out, or does it mean moving some of the text out? And I think this is something where, you know, we talked about it with the editor team a little bit and came to the conclusion that, yes, the upside here would be that moving this to bundle since most of what we're doing here is demultiplexing the bundle and figuring out how to do that, having it in the bundle document might actually be the right place. The downside of that would be that, like, now you might have to look at many different documents to figure out exactly how to write the code for doing the demultiplexing of bundle plus RTCP mux plus these various RTCP packets. So I think that we're looking for some guidance here on exactly how we should chop this up. And there are a bunch of folks who seem to have opinions on this, pursuant to Ted's request for getting people together to figure this out. Probably they should consider this broader problem of what guidance on how packets get taken apart should be in this document, what should be in bundle, and what should just point at other documents.
Jump next. I think you have to read too many documents is a bridge we have long since crossed. So I don't think that trying to, have one, and it's not like you can even avoid reading bundle if you're doing this, because, bundle is fundamental here. You don't have to read this one section of bundle, but you have to read the rest of it. It's not a terribly compelling argument.
No, but I guess one of the things you try to do in JSEP is to provide accurate description, high-level descriptions of what you have to do, and then pointers to the documents that tell you where to do them, so that you could read JSEP as a narrative thing rather than as just a link farm to a pile of different other documents.
Okay, yeah,
right?
if you're talking about, have the normative text for this in bundle, but an informative description of it, which is hopefully accurate in JSEP, that's fine. But I think the normative thing should probably be in bundle, unless there's something that we feel like that JSEP needs to do specifically that bundle leaves open.
I think we'd be happy to have it in bundle. I think I'm less happy to have it scattered across bundle and a bunch of other documents as well. That makes
a bunch of
other documents as well. That makes
what other documents would?
Well, in particular, it's got to be bundle and JSEP is kind of.
Yeah, well, so is there anything which? The question I have is there anything which JSEP wants to specify that bundle, in the general case, leaves open?
Well, there's the whole notion of mapping packets to RTP senders and receivers as opposed to mapping them to a given M section.
Well, I think I would argue that actually what you're doing here is you're mapping M sections to RTP senders and receivers. So
sure.
Bundled maps to M sections, and then M sections map to senders and RTP senders and receivers. And the second part is obviously JSEP's problem. But I think add that level of indirection, you make bundle's problems bundle, and you make JSEP's problems JSEP.
And that's an entirely consistent viewpoint. I think that if we're going to go down that path, what we really want is, to Eric's point earlier, we want specific sections that we can point out of, like, here's how the bundle multiplexing gets unpacked, and then here's how the RTCP multiplexing, and then the handling of RTCP feedback messages, how that routing all is done, and having a very clear set of text for each of those. And so it's not clear that all those sections exist. They may exist, and we just haven't sort of done the work to locate them. But I am wanting to avoid the case where it's you have to read this 150-page document to understand the 3 paragraphs that you need to figure out how to handle these packets.
Yeah, I haven't done that level of archaeology, and I think obviously bundle itself is still in this section a little bit in flux. So.
Okay, so we do have Colin and Magnus behind you in line, and I will notice that the bundle author is not in line. So possibly it would be nice to bring him up to the line at some point.
Just beaten down to
So people are volunteering work.
We'd like you to just rewrite the entire document, Christopher, if that'd be cool.
No, we're not going to do that. We're trying to get done. So Colin, you're first, and then.
Hi, Colin Perkins. So. We had a conversation about bundle on the music list, and I think that the most recent version of bundle makes some significant changes in this area, which actually clarify things tremendously. I think what this wants to do is actually very straightforward. I think what this draft wants to say is you need to look up the mid based on the M sections. The mid then maps to an RTP source, and based on the combination of the mid and based on the mid value, map an RTP source to whatever your RTP transceiver or whatever it's called in JSEP is. And I think that at that point you're done.
Okay, so I'm turning back to the bundle author now. Having heard all of this, would you be willing to work with Colin, Jonathan and Cullen to see whether it belongs in bundle?
Krister, sure. I mean, and the reason why I didn't get up early, because I think others already said the same idea that I had. But first of all, this in bundle, this is described in one section, so you don't need to read the whole bundle if this is what you're interested in. So for example, in JSEP you can reference to one section in bundle where this is described. So I don't, from that perspective, I don't think that's an issue. The proposal that I had on the list, and I think was supported, that bundle is, of course, doesn't know anything about JSEP. So what bundle does is describes how you get up your media to the M-line level. And I think that belongs there. We should not keep that in JSEP. Then what JSEP should describe is how you move forward from there. How do you map an M-line with an RTP receiver or whatever these things are called? So then we have it layered up to the M-line or below the M-line in bundle, and about the JSEP specific stuff in JSEP.
Okay.
So
that was my suggestion. So we really appreciate that. And the question, I guess, before I get to Magnus, do you have really something you need to interrupt with here, Magnus? Okay, is to ask the folks we named previously to go off and to try and come up with a PR that might be against bundle and a different PR against JSEP, taking some things out that have moved into bundle, or which are already present in bundle and don't need to be reiterated. Do you think you guys can get together before the Wednesday meeting so that we can try and have something to re-review?
Yeah, I just like to say that the PR to bundle was done very recently. Yeah. So maybe everyone hasn't seen it, so I encourage them to look at it. And of course, if they think something, no, we can't reference this from JSEP, whatever the reason is, of course we should fix that. But to be clear, you will have to describe in JSEP how you map from M-line to the RTP receivers in any case, because I don't think that belongs to bundle.
This is the text in 10.2, Krister. Associating blah blah streams the correct SDP media description. That's what we should be looking at.
I don't remember the section number, but it talks about it sounds like it's that.
I took a quick read
it talks
of it
about
now.
associating this, yeah, because the thing was what we changed based on comments, I think, from Colin, was previously we talked about associating RTP packets, but now we talk about associating the streams, and I think it makes it more clear.
Okay. So we have some action items before the Wednesday meeting. Magnus, do you want to say something else?
Yes. So Magnus, there's one issue here, which I think actually relates to us, this group, if we want to do something, and that is so bundle mandates to use on mids, and as a way of binding SSRCs to a particular media section in the SDP. And obviously, if you're using JSEP talking to other JSEP user, you would have the full capability because you're mandated to have that. So what's in the current section 6 is this PT-based, finding the M section based on PTs. It works in some cases. In some cases, it will not work because either they're not unique, or you actually, and one of the reasons why not be unique, because you run out of PTs and have to reuse them, or not reuse them, or saying multiple M lines need to use the same payload types. So that's one of the reasons why you can't have unique in all cases, even in JSEP. So that leads to the question if this PT base should be in at all, and I think it should go. I agree with Colin there. But I want to hear if there was anyone having a good argument for why it should stay in before this text for section 6 is written.
I'm really not sure that this is actually.
So I've always argued for leaving it in because there's lots of applications that can work perfectly fine without running out of PTs. If you're running out of PTs, obviously you got to go use extended PTs, right, in some form or another. But we've got lots of stuff that uses it and doesn't need to change. It reduces bandwidth, it keeps all the functionality the same. There's absolutely no, and it does not complicate implementations or code. We've seen that over and over again. There's no reason to just, demand people add the newer, bigger address space because the IP4 one couldn't possibly work. I mean, it just doesn't make sense, and it makes it much harder to translate in gateways between a lot of applications and other things. If you're saying you have to push that all the way back to the end of all these things on systems that there's no way they can possibly run out of PTs. So there's not a single argument for like why we can't use PTs when we don't run out of them.
Eric Piscorla, from the floor. We litigated this very extensively and came to the consensus we now have. And I'm really unhappy to see it being reopened. Like,
Yeah.
I think this is a very strong reason to reopen this discussion.
So, Colin Perkins. So, I think the argument against using PTs in this way is the same argument Harold had. It breaks the layering. The way you identify a stream in RTP is not the payload type; it's the SSRC. Right, and so you're exposing this low-level implementation detail, which is used for selecting the codec and using it for something completely different. And yes, implementations have been able to get away with that kludge in the past, but it's increasingly not going to be the case, and it really messes with all the layering and messes with the architecture of how you build things up, from the RTP streams through to the
Okay,
M-lines.
we're running out of time here, Colin, so please.
So what you asked for the arguments why we should get rid of the PT mapping. That's the argument. It breaks things.
Okay.
Jonathan Lennox. So not to speak to either side of this argument, but to say, as we discussed previously, this is the wrong group for this argument anyway. I think the question of whether, bundle is the document that decides how debundling works. So this is an MMusic argument, not an Rtcweb argument, I would argue. So I think, if bundle wants to allow PT mapping, bundle should allow PT mapping. If bundle doesn't, it doesn't. It's not Rtcweb's decision either way.
Fair enough, but I think that the biggest thing at this point is I don't want to rehab this conversation without text in front of the group, so that if somebody has text they want to propose or a PR that removes text, they can present that to the group. But at this point, having an unlinked conversation to a specific proposal is not really moving us forward. So at this point, on this larger point, we have a set of people who are going to go off and try and come up with that text in the next couple of days. So I think we should move to a different issue. This is the one we skipped.
Yeah, we're going downward because we're that way. This actually seems like I think we're going to want Justin again.
He's live.
Justin, would you care to deal with 366? I think it was Taylor.
Sure. Let me just make sure I have that open here. Yes, 366. So Taylor is really good at finding like all the very weird corner cases. And one of the things that came up in his investigation was that it could be possible for an application to basically call create offer at some point in the session, store the offer away, and even though it's not munging SDP, you could then replay that offer in the set local description at some point in the future. And one thing you could actually use that for would be to call create offer initially, get a full set of codecs, and then, later on in time, after the codecs have been negotiated downwards, try to sort of then open up the space of codecs that could be used by replaying the old offer. So generally, this sort of seems like it's something that would be harmful. It's we certainly don't want to encourage applications to do this. So we probably want to have invalidation of offers at some point. That if you've called create offer and you didn't pass it to set local description immediately, you probably want to have that offer become invalid at some point. So there's really three places at which it could become invalid. You could become invalid at the point where anything happens to the session. It could become invalid when the signaling state returns to stable, or it could become invalid anytime the signaling state changes or set local description is called. My proposal is that it becomes invalid when you call set local description. If you call create offer multiple times, generate multiple offers, anything that you didn't pass set local description becomes invalidated at that point in time. And I think there's a very straightforward way that we could accomplish this. We've already talked about having this version number counter and create offer that increases monotonically. and basically set and local description can remember the previous version number that it used, and anything that was any version number that was smaller than the one that had previously been supplied to set and local description, they'd all become invalidated. So overall, I don't really think this is a huge issue, but we probably do want to ensure that if we're closing off one backdoor, we close off others as well. Anyway, it seems like there's a few people lined up to talk.
Christopher was first.
Yeah, Christopher, I think there was an email discussion not too long ago about this. I don't remember whether it was really related to this issue, but I think my proposal will be, which I think it's much easier, but maybe it breaks something, is that an offer becomes invalid the next time you create or you call create offer. Obviously, the session can go down and stuff, whatever. But I mean, you call create offer, and then if you call create offer again, whatever was previously done is now gone. Obviously, you can still try to call set local descriptor with an old offer, but there is nothing that's going to guarantee that that's going to work, and that should be a must not. I mean, doing that is actually doing something wrong. Whatever you place in your set local description should be what you got from the previous create offer call. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's one, that's perhaps the most drastic change. I'm a little bit worried that might break some code out there. It would be kind of strange code, perhaps, but like, it certainly wouldn't be, it certainly doesn't hurt anything if you called create offer to get offer A, and then create offer to get offer B, and then decided to do set and local with A. So this is sort of an approach to try to prevent bad things and avoid breaking, code that already exists.
Reply to that?
Oh, go ahead.
I thought that my understanding was not really a change. It's how it already works. I mean, I just think you could have some strange. You calling create offer, for example, with five different M lines, audio, video, all this stuff, and then you call create offer again only with audio, and then suddenly you call set local descriptor with all this audio and video and whatever you got previously. So I think that's going to mess things up.
We'll always have some cases like this, though, because you could call create offer and then you could call like add track right after that. And now things have changed and are not reflected in create offer, but that should be allowed to be passed to set and local description anyway. So I think we have to deal with this problem no matter what. And what I'm trying to do with this proposal is bias us toward avoiding things that could be bad, but also trying to be sensitive about not breaking code that really isn't doing anything bad.
Christopher, you? So, I mean, I'm fine with this particular change, though I would observe that my understanding is that the current WebRTC PC spec does not guarantee validity of create offer past return to the stable state in the JavaScript engine. If you call create offer and then you call create offer twice and you attempt to impose the first create offer in the promise resolution or the callback for the second create offer, then the browser is entirely free to reject that. So code which is currently doing that, why I have no interest in breaking it, is relying on undefined behavior.
It's true.
Peter Thatcher. So if Ecker is right, then I think that we should go with the invalidate on create offer, because there might be an edge case to an edge case here where you call set local and then you call rollback, and now is it still invalidated or not? And it might get complicated in that sense. So I kind of like the idea of there only being allowed to be one outstanding offer, basically.
How do all this, John? I thought this was the way things already worked, the way it's supposed to work. Because when I looked at the language that says you can't change the offer between create offer and set local, I thought, okay, how am I going to police that? Oh, I have to store a checksum or something across the offer to check that it hasn't been changed. Well, that means that if I store one checksum, that means that all other offers created by whatever means won't work anymore. And so permitting old offers to be set is actually more work, because then I have to keep a stack of valid offer checksums or valid offer copies or whatever. So I think invalidating all previous offers on create offer is the way things are already documented to work. Or rather, that's the way, or rather, the document already says that if you try to apply anything but the last create offer, it won't work.
I found the text I'm citing. So got these these are scary section numbers. I'm trying to find the section number, but anyway, under the description of create offer in WebRTC PC, it says session description generated by create offer must be immediately usable by set local description without causing an error, as long as set local description is called reasonably soon. If a system has limited resources, blah blah blah. Session descriptions must remain usable by set local description without causing an error until at least the end of the fulfillment callback of the return promise. So my claim is there's no guarantee after that point. And so that doesn't, by the way, that doesn't mean you can't call create offer, call add track in the middle of the fulfillment promise and then call set local. That's legal, and that's supposed to work. But of course, the way it works is by not having the track do anything useful.
So I think I've heard mostly folks arguing for retaining the current state of play. Justin, I guess you're the one who might scream if we continue that direction. Are you okay with us, or do you want to make another argument for making this change?
I certainly do not have any argument against. My only argument is try to avoid breaking code that might exist that's out there. I agree with Eric that it does sort of indicate that there's no guarantee that it's going to work past that local description or past the create offer callback. It doesn't mean it's going to fail, but that just might be the simplest thing for us to take, and I'm fine if we continue in that path.
Okay, given that this is where we are, I think the simplest possible thing we can do that would succeed seems like the best thing to do. So I think we probably have rough consensus to retain the current state of play.
And so just to be specific,
okay, 260.
Does that mean that we are going to create offer always invalidates the previous offer, or that create offer is always invalidated at the end of returning to the stable state in JavaScript?
Yeah, so actually, I mean, it's actually more subtle than that, which is the current state of play is, that if you do any of these things which we now said you shouldn't do, like, it may work or demons may fly out of your nose. And what the prescription here in the previous slide, regardless of the specific trigger points, is that you actually get an error if you try to do any of these things, and not this undefined behavior. It's forbidden behavior. So I mean, we're not discussing retaining the current state of play. We're discussing codifying the undefined behavior to be a failure.
Okay, and so the simplest way to do that seems to be the whenever you call create offer, it invalidates any other outstanding offers. Is there a simpler way to do that?
Well, that's not exactly what I heard Eric say.
Well, yeah. I mean, wait a second. It's the current specification actually guarantees that. So calling create offer again, causing a failure upon calling create offer again actually would break compliant applications. And the reason is because the guarantee is that the offer is valid until the return of the promise callback. So if I call create offer in the promise callback, then or I call successive create offers, then in both those cases, when the first promise callback is being executed, I can call set local, I can call create offer, and then the first promise callback, I can call set local. And that's absolutely guaranteed to work by the current specification. And so the only the text that you would need to make to forbid some set of things while remaining while not breaking some class of currently valid applications is return to JavaScript stable state. Now, I'm not saying that's the best answer. Maybe it'd be better to break those applications than to try to import the JavaScript model in here. But if all you're trying to do is turn undefined behavior into bustage, then the only thing you can do is say JavaScript stable state return. I think I'm right. If I'm wrong, someone please tell me.
I do think the case that you mentioned is actually a valid case, because I know some applications call create offer as a method of capability discovery. So while it might be kind of unusual to do that inside of the actual callback for create offer, like, it's not impossible. I also, though, generally think that there may be cases where apps are calling set timeout or something like that or have some queue or some other mechanism where they aren't doing something with the offer by the time stable state occurs. And if we're going to invalidate the offer at stable state, I bet that will break something. So I think we probably need to find something here that we feel like it's not going, like, we can't think of any reasonable scenario where it would break code and yet still achieves like the purpose.
Okay, so it sounds like the proposal from Ecker is that there's a small study team that goes off and do that. I'm hoping, Harold, will you take a membership in that small study team? Peter, how about you as well? Okay, and Ecker? Okay, so Peter, Harold, and Ecker will get together with between now and Wednesday and come up with a proposal here. Okay, on to 266, for those of you playing the home game.
Yeah, we've been around this so many times. Executive summary. Alice offers some set of things, offers A and B. Bob answers B. Now you're doing B. In a reoffer, can someone offer A, B, and not just B? That's the executive question. The current text says that no, you can't. It says you can only make things smaller. You can't make them bigger after you start the connection. Yeah. I'm going to let Justin and Cullen defend this. I actually do not feel strongly at this point at all. I'm just reporting that people. That I think Justin and Cullen both felt that this was like a pain in the ass to try to expand things and it would make life complicated.
Right. So there's really two questions wrapped up in here. So the first question is like whether it should be possible to expand the envelope of things that the session is capable of, after the initial offer answer exchange. But the second question is that, is this actually a problem we have to go solve? Because solving the general problem of, hey, I want to have all the stuff renegotiated is perhaps a little bit different than what's being discussed on the mailing list right now. And what's being discussed in the mailing list right now is really the desire for an SFU to be able to switch codecs. Initially, say an implementation supports A and B, the SFU may want to say, hey, I want to use codec A and give an answer that only contains A. However, in the future, it may want to switch to B, perhaps because somebody with B joined. And in that case, it wants the implementation to generate a new offer with A and B such that it can then reply with an answer that says, hey, now use B instead. Having read this, I sort of feel like this might be an API problem rather than like this broader question of how do we renegotiate all the capabilities of the session? Because it sort of feels like the SFU could return back an answer that says, either A or B, or both A and B, and then there could be some way of controlling like which one is actually preferred, which one is actually the codec that's going to be in use. So that's, I think, as a set of editors, like our current thinking around the problem. I want to make sure we're thinking about it properly, because if so, we can then try to focus on this problem of, how do we solve this SFU issue rather than trying to tackle the general, what could be a very thorny problem.
Christian?
Yes, Chris, I think this is very strange. First of all, is there a difference between adding a previously discarded codec or adding a codec that previously wasn't offered at all? I mean, let's say that you offer H.264 and VP8 and you only get H.264 back. Now, this seems to say that you can't offer VP8 later because it was discarded, but you can, for example, offer H.265 later because that was never offered to begin with.
I think those are isomorphic.
So that needs to be clear. But I just don't. I don't think, because there's other use cases. Let's say you start, for example, and you have all this bandwidth and everything. So maybe you rejected some low bandwidth codec because you thought it wasn't needed. But then you move out somewhere and you come in an area where you really don't have bandwidth, so you really want to offer this again, this low bandwidth, but now this prevents you from doing that just because you have done it previously. So that's one use case. And another use case is, let's say that you have audio and video, and then again, for whatever reason, you terminate the video stream altogether. Again, it could be because of bandwidth issues. And then again, when you want to put it back, does this mean now that you can't offer the video stream with the previously used codec again because you already used it, but you terminated the stream? In my opinion, this should be an implementation issue like it is in today. I mean, obviously the APIs and everything should support it, but I don't think we should really forbid this, because this is basic offer answer in my opinion.
So let me touch on those 2 points individually. Or actually, there's 3 points there. So the first question was about, whether there's a difference between offering H.265, like a new codec, or offering the same codec that had previously offered but then wasn't accepted. And an easy way to think about what the problems that exist here are around reservation of resources. That if you're going to offer a new codec, you better be ready to actually decode that codec. Now, you might want to actually start spinning up a new codec if indeed something has changed. But probably if you're just doing an ICE restart, you don't want that to all of a sudden trigger that you're going to then initialize the H.264 decoder, even if you're already using some other codec, just because on the off chance somebody might want to do something with it. So that's point one. Point two is the question around, I've actually forgotten part of it. Anyway, actually, I kind of forget. I'll have to look at the notes. Oh, the audio video thing, right? So yeah. So the audio video question is like, if you actually had audio and video, and then you discard video, and then you added it later, that's a new M section at that point, or for all practical purposes, it's new, and then that's treated basically like a reinitialization. So like that really isn't an issue. And then the last point around the low bandwidth codec. There's no reason why the initial answer, which defines the envelope of the session, couldn't include the low bandwidth codec. You don't have to use it, of course, but if you think that you might use it, then you actually probably ought to include that in the initial answer.
Well, I think there is a reason, because if there may be restrictions to how many codecs I can have resources for simultaneously, because if I offer codec A and B, that means that I'm willing to receive it at the same time. You can switch however you want. And also, if you send me back A and B in the answer, I can send both of those to you. But if you think, no, I can only do A, so I'm only going to do A, and that's the only thing you're going to send back. But that at some point, I do offer you B. Maybe I remove A because, we can't use it with this bandwidth. But again, no, you don't allow me to do that because you previously rejected B.
I mean, that's okay.
So, Peter. So we have Peter in queue.
Peter. So first, I want to agree with Justin that in the MC or SFU case, the SFU or MCU can just answer in this case both codecs, and then we already have the API points for selecting which codec to actually send with. That's what RTP sender.set parameters can do. But even though I don't like this idea, is it worth considering having an offer options like we have for ICE Restart, but one that is kind of reoffer all codecs. And so the application can choose whether it wants to reoffer all codecs or not. Like I said, if we don't need that, I would prefer not to add it. But if we really do need to sort of support both these use cases, then can we just let the app choose?
So that's the solution that we were contemplating if we actually felt like we needed to go down this path. The concern was that it wasn't quite clear what the bounds of that would be. Is it just codecs, or would it be like RTP header extensions or RTCP feedback mechanisms? Like how many different things would end up being renegotiated? And that felt like it could be like a very, I don't know, ill-defined set of things to nail down. So like my hope.
Well, you could just say you could just say you treat it as if you had removed an inline and added one. You just happen to have the same mid. You know, it's like if you called remove track and add track, but the mid doesn't change. Basically, we offer everything.
Right, but then like you end up with things like, well, what if, you know, should you renegotiate RTCP mux at that point in time? And clearly, some things, you know, don't make sense to renegotiate, and trying to figure out which ones do and which ones don't wasn't a task we were super excited about.
Okay, so it's going to be Ronnie, Adam, and then the front mic.
Ronnie Evan. The point you were making was something that was discussed in MUsic for regular SDP offer answer. The thing is that in SDP, you are not really defining capabilities, but you're defining the will to receive immediately. And it's a big problem, since what you said is true, because what will happen typically with the way I know it is that once you negotiate the initial codec, then you'll just remove all the others because you're not ready to receive them because it requires resources. Now, you have to be ready to receive it afterwards because you don't know it. You may be switched now to another source that doesn't support, for example, that by like an MCU that does some switching from a different source in the same connection. So he'll need to renegotiate the codec in that case.
So
if there's an intermediary in the middle that does that.
So you're basically saying that, like, due to resource concerns, somebody will actually remove, you know, most of the codecs, and then at that point in time, the only way to actually then switch to a new codec will be doing a new offer that contains all the codecs.
Yeah. And it may be a full offer because I mean it may be, and it may include, like you said, it may include header extension or whatever, because I mean it's maybe it's coming from a different place. And by the way, that's why I'm selling something about which was not very well received here. We did the CapNeg in SDP in order to support this mechanism to allow you to define capability and use them later. But that's water under the bridge.
CapNeg. Okay, Adam.
Adam Roach. So I think that fundamentally we have to be able to receive these sorts of things because we're going to be talking through gateways to things that do SDP, and they're going to have their own notion about what they're including in subsequent offers in a session. So receiving these, we have to be very accommodating to those kinds of things, right? If someone has said, we've narrowed the codex down to A and subsequently offers something with A, B, and C, even though we weren't talking about B and C prior to that, we have to handle it sensibly. Otherwise, interoperation with like SIP networks is just a non-starter, right? So receiving this, we have to do. The question comes down to what we're going to send. And from that perspective, I agree with, there have been some tangential comments about we probably want an API surface to control this. I think we do long-term. I think we probably don't need that now, and I don't think we need to put that in this document. I think we could probably easily get away with, this is up to the implementations. What we expect things to do right now is behave in way X and sort of describe what we're doing right now, which is, as I understand it, restricting things. And say, and there may be future extensions, future API extensions, basically, that change this behavior to go back to the original set or have a broader set or what have you, and not go through the exercise of defining those now, because I don't think they're critical. They'll be nice to have in the future, maybe, if we come up with use cases for them.
So just to clarify my understanding, Adam, right now you'd have to do a full reinitialization to get all of those. And you're saying that in the future we might add API surface to allow you to do this without a full reinitialization. Is that right?
Yes, maybe. in the future.
Maybe, right.
Yes, I mean, this would not be like a WebRTC 1.0 thing. It might just be a, at some point in the in the subsequent thing we do in the W3C, it's like create offer and add things back true.
Yeah.
And you get something different out of it. But like I said, I don't think that's something we need to define in JSIP. I don't think it's something we need to define in either place right now.
Okay, so Harold, you're going
So
up to
just
the line?
quickly, Adam, you're suggesting we just do nothing
I'm gonna
at this
cut
point?
I have to admit, I'm not familiar with exactly what the document says right now, but what I would probably do here is put in some non-normative text saying this is kind of what things are likely to act like in the short term, and that may change.
Okay, so I'm cutting the line at this point, and it will go Jonathan, Ecker, Mo, Cullen, Harold.
Jonathan Max. I mean, in the SFU case, I think there's certainly the case where you say, okay, initially we're in a conference and one of the people in the conference doesn't, they don't do VP9. They drop out. We'd really like to switch to VP9. We need to support that use case. And forcing me to do simultaneously a reoffer and an API FROB seems unfortunate. So I mean, so Peter says off mic, I don't need a reoffer, though which I guess means that I keep saying I'm willing to receive VP9 even though I'm actually not in the offer answer, which also seems very odd to me. So Peter shrugs because he doesn't mind doing things that are very odd. So, but I would say that, I think we need to make sure that case happens, and I'd rather it not be ugly. But I mean, because obviously that is a very real use case. That, the guy who doesn't do the codec that I really want to use was in the call and now was dropped off.
So I don't feel strong at the codec thing. It's this example of RTCP mux that's making me sad. I don't want to be renegotiating the sort of basic transport parameters. I do not want to be renegotiating halfway through the session, and we've actually went to fair amount of trouble in JSEP to kind of make those things difficult, and under the assumption that those are one-way ratchets, and I prefer not to.
We cut the line, Peter.
Have that.
So when we add a new M line after we've already negotiated our specs, it's a question, clarifying question. So if we add a new M line after we've already negotiated RTC mux, do we
I think
include it or not include it?
I think that can do anything it wants. I think a new M line can do anything it wants.
So when we call create offer with a new M line, that would not
okay.
assume that RTC mux started
So
going on. I mean, we're already.
I think you're going to have to take it offline because we did cut the line.
Mozanetti, I think we should leave the spec as it is. I think there's a misconception that expanding it to support these lighter weight renegotiations is a misconception that there's going to be some kind of glitchless behavior across this, and there's an expectation that it's going to be a better user experience than tearing things down more forcefully. And I don't think that's going to be the case. There's going to be a ton of delay to do this lightweight re-SDP, and by that time you're going to already miss early media from whoever you were trying to pull in, whatever codec you're trying to switch to from that other participant. So I think in this case it's simpler to just, if you want to change something fundamental, you can tear down the whole session and set it back up again. There's not really a need for finer grained resets of individual things.
So Mo, how would you picture that work? Would that just be adding a new M section or a new peer connection?
Yeah, you can remove it and then add it back.
Okay.
I just want so let's say we leave the spec roughly as it is today, but and don't add a new fob surface to do this. Admit that maybe in the future some other API will extend it that way. But I want to come back to the point Adam was making about we need to be able. We will receive these from the far side. We're going to have to deal with things. And I think that the most important use case people care about falls in that category, and we might be getting really worried about something that's not been an issue. So let me walk you through the case that I think Adam was pointing out most, which is you're on a switch conference and every one of your clients is really modern and does VP22, and you're using VP22, and that's negotiated and it's all been set up that way. And suddenly a VP9 client shows up and says, and you need to basically downgrade every client to VP9. That you will have negotiated VP22, and I agree that it probably will be just 22. You won't leave 9 in as well. That causes a lot of confusion on other things. But at that point, it's the MCU that's going to be sending down the reoffer that says, hey, now I'm offering you VP9. And you can either say, and that's not one of the things that's currently negotiated. You can either accept VP9 or say, no, sorry, I can't do any video at all. Even though you'd previously offered it. And I don't think the browsers would do that. I think they'll take the VP9, they get it from that. And so we could sort of just address that one issue, that we have to be able to receive offers that perhaps had a broader scope than the current envelope that's negotiated, and do whatever we do with it. It's probably good to be able to do codec changes there, if nothing else. I don't really care about the transport parameters in the slightest, to Ecker's point. And I think if we take care of that one thing with Adam, we have the minimal changes from the current spec, we deal with that issue, and we address the use case that's really the fundamental use case that's mostly driving the request for this option.
A clarifying question, Cullen. From what I understood from what you were saying, you get the new VP9 person, and everybody who was previously using VP22 gets a new offer as a result. But are you anticipating then that offer would be VP22 plus VP9, or everybody would have to switch to VP9?
No, I mean, with the MCU case that's driving this, everybody has to switch to VP9.
Okay, so in that case, it's actually not what's on this slide, right? Which is
no, because initially what happened is the 22, the thing offered 9 through 22, and you selected 22, and 9 was discarded, and now we're going back to a reoffer that only offers 9. But it's from the far side. A browser's never doing this. It's the MCU that's offering 9.
And so there's, I think that the question that we'll come back to on the list, since we're running out of time for this, is the actual impact of doing it in the way Mo suggested. But Harold, you're up.
Concrete proposal as to additional API surface. Just say no at this iteration. We can always add more frobs later. We have much more difficulty taking them away from people. So I like the document as is. I suggest, as a matter of issue handling, that we create a new issue, not this one, for the case of incoming offers that have more capabilities than we currently support.
Okay.
I mean, that's a separable issue. It's not this one.
Okay, Cullen, would you open that new issue?
Yes.
Given that new issue being opened, would we be otherwise okay with leaving the documents description without the new frob and without this capability for right now? Understanding that it may return in later iterations?
I'm fine with that.
Anybody going to
there are some people on the mailing list who seem to be concerned.
Okay, we'll confirm this on the mailing list, but it looks like in the room, there is no objection to that path forward. We'll see what the mailing list says. Okay. Okay, so this is the point at which we leave the slides and switch over to the issues list. So we will also change which chair is running the slide deck. Here we go.
Okay. Okay, which one do you want me to go to?
So the last one was 266, and I think they're going down.
So hold on. So that was the one that were over here.
Yeah, so keep going.
Hit the discuss tag.
Smart. So that's 266, so now we got to go up.
And we did 364.
Yeah, okay. So
66, 66. We did mid, so the top, starting here.
So, did that. I think we did 2. We did that. Root track. 3.5. We did that already.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the ones that are less than 8 hours.
Okay.
Right.
So, what I actually suggest we do is if you have people that raise these issues in the room, I suggest that we summon said person to the microphone to explain their position, and then we can debate it. And this particular person is Bernardo.
All right, so I got to get Justin out of the queue.
Yeah, goodbye, Justin. You're frozen anyway, so you know. Maybe Echo's just boned.
Yes, unfortunately, it does seem to be that way.
I'm not sure. Yeah. Are you pushing the Meet Echo, like, get over here button? Maybe you can go to a different issue then.
Okay.
388, perhaps. Bernard again. That is Magnus Westerlund to the microphone.
So yeah. I mean, currently the specifications says that you need to only support square pixels, I think. But it comes back to, I think, to value of there's several aspects of this. One is, but I mean, basically the text written is that you should at least not forbid people if they actually want to indicate support of non-square pixels. That's one aspect of it. And there's also this issue of, you write that you must use the highest Q value, and it's not clear if they're actually multiple what you would do. So
I'm trying to reconstruct this. I have some vague memory that we felt there was some reason why you couldn't cause JSON endpoints to bring down square pixels, but I can't remember what that reason might have been. So,
I think it loosely summarized as it's 2016 and square pixels are a pain in the ass. They're only used in H323. Why are we still screwing around with CIF resolution 320? Now, I'm not saying I support that point of view. I'm just trying to report the facts as I see them.
yeah. I also don't want to change that you don't need to support it. It's mostly its style of writing, that you don't write it as saying you must not at all offer it, saying, okay, this is what you need to offer is only for square pixels.
Sure. I guess I thought, as I say, I thought I had some vague memory that we concluded that in order to cause the browser to do it, you needed some control surface which you didn't have, but that may be completely specious, in which case, if that's not true, then I agree that the style of writing is wrong.
I think I'm more worried about actually being able to potentially support receiving non-squared and rather than generating them. So
right. So I think it does say we're supposed to be able to receive them, correct? Scrolling up.
Yeah, you're right. That's true.
So I think what you'd like is simply not to ban the browser from sending square.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. To be clear, it's square that we want, non-square we don't want, right? Okay.
So just so I'm summarizing right of what we're going to do moving forward is we're going to say is mandatory to implement at least square pixels. If you want to do non-square pixels, that's optional to implement. And on receive, you must be able to receive both square and non-square, or that's
it already says that.
Okay, that already says.
Can you scroll up, please?
Okay. This sounds really easy to fix.
Yeah. See, so it says should receive and render video the correct aspect ratio. So, okay. Can someone make a note that what we're going to do is we're simply going to relax the requirement that you will not generate non-square pixels. And then now we have this queue thing. I don't even know who wrote that text, but do you have a proposed resolution for this?
No, I unfortunately don't. I don't have a resolution. I mean, it's the problem. Probably you would like to inspect to which to use in some sense, and it comes to the other parameters which you should choose. So it becomes a little bit strange, I think. So it's not trivial. From that perspective.
Well, that's too bad.
Yeah.
Maybe you could lead a design team to fix it.
How many beers will it take to get this fixed is my real question, because at this point I'm willing to bribe people.
I guess we can move on. I will try to see if we can find.
Be there shortly, hopefully. We're rebooting.
Well,
Correct.
are we back to remove track?
Oh, we have Bernard.
Yeah.
We could be back to remove.
Yeah. So the issue here was that we were. It said you stop sending and you set the negotiation needed flag. The question was exactly what's the mechanism for stop sending. It doesn't appear to be permanent. So the suggestion from Taylor was that effectively you set sender.track to null. That stops the sending. And so that's what I think the proposed resolution is. Just make it clear that that's what's happening. You're not permanently stopping the sender or using the set direction mechanism, which would not do anything immediately.
That would be a satisfactory resolution to me.
Colin, does that sound good? Do you want to get him to repeat it? Bernard, could you repeat just what you said?
Basically the proposed resolution is for remove track to say that you're setting sender.track to null. To make it clear that this is not a permanent stop, right? Because it is reversible. And to make it clear that that it takes effect immediately, as opposed to just setting negotiation needed and waiting for the outcome of negotiation to stop the sender.
This is Colin here. Yeah, I +1 on that. I think that sounds like a good plan. And does that line up reasonably well with ORTC as well?
In ORTC you would probably use the active FROB, but I think it does line up with what the intent is here.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna swap Justin in hopefully.
All right. So my understanding was that remove track would actually stop the sender. That if you wanted to just stop the stream, you would call set track null. But remove track would basically queue up a negotiation needed to basically zero out the M line, the same way that add track would suggest basically adding a new M section that would be negotiated. I think there's 3 different things.
So
anyway, go ahead.
Peter Thatcher. I think the confusion here is around the names add track and remove track, which unfortunately we can't change. But add track is sort of, I want to send and I want to receive. And remove track is just, I want to stop sending. But it doesn't imply that you would stop receiving something.
But if you scroll down here a little bit, like, so that stop would be stop sending and receiving. But I think remove track would then put you into receive only mode and queue that signaling exchange. And that here we end up with 3 different potential APIs that do 3 different things, which seems good.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. But I think the point is that on the second bullet point, the mechanism for actually stopping the sending, at least Taylor's suggestion, is to do the same thing that the first bullet point does. So the second bullet point is a superset of the first, which I think makes sense.
So is the belief here that the sequence that if I wish to that the sequence of remove track followed by set track, so say I've got a track and I assign this in temporary and then I do remove track value and then I set track value, those reverse each other, right? because you can't add track again because that adds it at the end.
That would cause you to be sending again, but then when the signaling eventually resolves, then you wouldn't be sending again.
And so to be clear, if I remove track, then I stop sending RTP and I queue negotiation, and then eventually I negotiate. Now I'm in receive only mode, we'll say. And then if I set track with the track again, that has no effect.
Correct.
And then how do I cause it to renegotiate? No, because add track shows on the end.
Then you call set direction on the transceiver.
Okay.
So if you have a receive only transceiver and you call set track on its sender, it's not going to send anything because it's receive only.
It just sits there.
It just sits there, yeah. Which is fine because then you might want it like that so that when negotiation does complete, media flows. And in fact, for optimization reasons, it could be faster that way because the video pipeline might already have information about the size of the video frames and that kind of thing.
Sure. So the impact of remove track is set track null followed by set direction receive only.
Exactly, which is, I think, what he had written there.
I believe that between Thatcher and myself, we can figure out what to go in the document.
Awesome.
Based on this discussion here, unless Justin wishes to write it.
Okay, so that one we did, but now we got to go back to the pixel one, right?
Oh,
I think Justin had something to say.
yeah,
not square pixels.
So on the queue thing, one question would be like, I know we've historically shied away from some of this, but would it be sufficient to say if there are multiple things with the same queue value, we just simply take the first one that appears in the session description?
You mean the first one that appears in the media section?
Yeah, I mean, this is also scoped to media section, but like we actually use the ordering of the lines in the SDP to break ties.
So I personally think that that's implementation dependent, right? You can break the tie any way you like. The definition of Q value is that they're the same. So sorry, that was Ted Hardy. I should have gone to the floor microphone for that.
Right. I mean, so one way to slightly resolve this question would be to say, can we go back to the text above?
This?
Q, blah, blah, blah. Yes. Where is the, there we go. Highest Q value. So, I mean, one way to fix this would be to just rewrite this text to say other than one with the highest Q value, or other than an attribute, so I mean, basically to be clear that you were only going to take one, right?
Right.
But I mean, and then leave up to implementation discretion which one to choose.
Right.
I think is what you said.
Yes.
Yeah, jump to the next. I mean, I think the semantic of multiple identical Q values is the peer really doesn't care which one of those you pick. So, I mean, so unless we have some reason why we need the browsers to be deterministic, then I'd say if nobody cares,
we have tried to be deterministic elsewhere. So, and we couldn't leave it as implementation dependent, but I don't know. It seems like it would be nice to sort of say, well, since we're being pretty descriptive about exactly how we choose a Q value here, and like we ignore various attributes and everything, we shouldn't waive, or it would be nice if we didn't just sort of punt on this particular problem.
Ted Hardy from the floor, and then Cullen. I just don't want to lose the semantic that's currently there for centers that use Q values, and that is that I really don't care. You can certainly put in there that if you need a tiebreaker, you may do it by M section, but if they have some other tiebreaker they want to use, the last one instead of the first one, the semantic of the center is that it is the same. That they're equally happy, not the same, excuse me. So, Cullen?
I'm just like, I think this is one of the things that we're going to have a lot of these in the end where it really doesn't matter what we choose. We could say it's implementation dependent. We could set to be deterministic. I'm perfectly happy either way. It's not going to cause any harm no matter which choice we pick here. It will cause harm if we don't pick a choice.
So the only thing you have to do if you say it's based on ordering is then suddenly preserving the ordering matters.
Well, I mean, in SDP, yes, that's true, but that's sort of inherently, that's largely true in SDP generally. I mean, I think there's also some risk that maybe some people might start using the same Q values when they actually want them selected differently because you've now put a different ordering metric on them or something. And you can make all these sorts of arguments. And I don't know. This is all, like, this is not stuff I'm losing sleep over. I'm perfectly happy with, I mean, I generally support the idea of let's make things more deterministic than less. I don't care what we do on this one, right? Like,
Area Director, do you have a coin on you?
President, I think we could just put the word first before one and we'd be done. First one with the highest.
That is what I would like to do.
Okay, that's,
yeah.
is anybody violently against that?
No, I think it, so. Magnus, I think it's fine for the moment. I'm gonna look a little bit to see if there are any bad cases with that, but at least we go with that for the moment. That's fine.
Okay, I will point out to you that there's no way for you to tell that the other side did that because but fine.
Yeah,
so you want to do that? Fine.
So we'll stick the word first in front of the one and we'll call it a day. Cool. All right, so we got like 6 minutes left and I guess we got one more left.
So we didn't talk about the non-square pixels. But...
Number 407.
Okay. Well, yeah, I covered that. I heard us say that it's up to the implementation where it could send non-square pixels. But the one thing I wasn't quite clear on, like, what would we do if it was actually a codec that didn't support, sending non-square pixels? There was no SEI or whatever to indicate the pixels were in fact non-square.
And you can't do it.
I think that the way that document that specifies SAR the way we use it is sort of overrides anything that would have been any. Anyway, sorry, another working group. Fine, we do whatever is allowed. But what I was going to say is, I believe that the way this document's written, it ends up being that you can do non-square pixels now in every single codec, even if they didn't previously support it, because we provide a generic algorithm to do that, or generic approach to doing it.
Jonathan, maybe this is opening a can of worms, but I think sort of the converse case is what happens if you have a codec that doesn't support square pixels. Because as I recall, H.263 is like always assumes like 11 to 10 or some stupid ass thing like that. So, yeah, but H.263, yeah, I know, but I feel bad. Believe me, I feel bad about H.263, but it's still out there. So, does it? I mean. But I thought like the default is 16 to 15 or something. I thought the default is that it doesn't support square.
This is why we mandated VP8 and 264 for support.
Mozanetti, I think it actually may be good to keep the original text and just keep the prohibition, because now it's going to leave ambiguity in the spec and implementations about whether or not you can force the browser to do this. If I send image attribute receive with a SAR of 1.1, will it be honored? I have no idea, right? If the spec is ambiguous, they have no idea whether the implementation supports it. There's no code points there's no API or code points in the browser to figure out whether or not it'll do it. So it seems like it's just useless to leave it open.
That's my feeling as well.
Okay. So, I mean, I have no strong argument for non-square pixel from that perspective. I was looking at the spec and found several places where it wasn't obvious that there were any motivation why they were written the way it was written. And this one, it seems to be might be actual motivations why you don't want to support non-square pixels at all. And if that's the case, that's fine. But
well, I think that if someone
Krister, are you going to come to the
Someone
mic?
can write a use case where they think that we may want to have support for something in the future that's currently being prohibited. That would be something that we could then try to understand. Could the text be modified? Do we think this is a use case that's in scope, and if so, what could we do to the text? But I'm a little leery to sort of take on something where there's no sort of use case identified, because it may just be that the determinism that's imposed now is actually the best thing.
The next one, 407.
Okay, we're moving to issue 407.
Magnus, you're at the mic. Do we?
Just a minute. Actually, before we go to the next thing, I want to try and conclude the last one. I don't understand what what did we switch to? We're on this square pixel is we're going to leave the text the same. So sending square pixels is forbidden. Okay, except for spherical video. Okay.
So we did this one, then we're done, right?
Okay.
Well, I mean, Harold's supposed to put his issues in, right?
Right. So we will return to JSEP on Wednesday for several things. One, we had a couple of design teams that are going off to produce glorious text to resolve the relevant issues. We also have Harold, who sent email to the list, and he and I will work out which of us is entering the relevant issues. And we'll go through those before we tackle the rest of the agenda. So when we return, same bat time? Nope, not. Different bat time and different bat channel. We will still be on the same GitHub repo. Okay, that's it for today, everybody. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks. If there's another copy of the blue sheets, please bring them to the front. Thanks, Justin.
Bring them to the front. We keep putting you down as a chair just because, old time's sake.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt my feelings.
You didn't notice I took my name off.
No, I didn't.
Exactly. Wow, so warm with its 240 volts worth of energy. They don't get as hot in America because they don't put as much energy through them.
I'll drop this off.
Thank you. We have one more, right? You got both?
Yeah, I don't know where it is yet, but I'll find it.